Like, currently, like, I know that, like, somebody wants to kill me. There's, like, more than one person that wants to kill me. So I'm just, I'm honestly so suicidal that, like, I don't know if I give a shit if somebody shoots me, you know, when I speak the truth. I won't say that it's all of Hollywood that's involved in this, because I honestly don't know how many people are involved in this. I just know the specific people that I had to interact with. So I don't know, and I wouldn't venture to say that everybody in Hollywood is, but the fact that people have come forward and said that there's like so much sexual abuse and so much like culty kind of shit, like that these are facts, and that like Hollywood is based on that. And in the 90s, they started basically like a fake Project Monarch cult, and they implemented those ideas into like creating like child stars that they could have control over and use as like chess pieces. And I don't know how many people are involved. All I know is that James Gunn and Harvey Weinstein definitely were involved. So, and as far as me being able to like talk about it, it's taken like years and years of me healing and like going through years of therapy. I have like a social worker, and I'm gonna say this right now, but like the usage of ecstasy, MDMA, and LSD has helped me kind of go back in the past to piece together what exactly happened. And I actually was sexually victimized more recently when I was 19, and after that, and that kind of made me remember all of this shit, because this stopped when I was 8 years old, right? So then after 8 years old, my parents acted like things were normal, like after they completely traumatized me and convinced me that I had my lobotomy, and convinced me that my amygdala was taken out, and like all kinds of things. So I was highly fucking traumatized, and like trying to grasp at like what normalcy was psychologically, because I was convinced I was abnormal, because I was convinced that parts of my brain were taking out. So I had so much focus and emphasis on that I wasn't even focusing on my parents' threats that they had made, and I couldn't even like for the life of me like focus on the things that had happened in the past. Like everything was all present for me because I was so focused on like my brain and everything that was going on. And the way that my parents convinced me that I had a lobotomy is by faking a lobotomy situation, essentially. Like they had a doctor come in and like rape me and convince me that I was lobotomized and stuff, in an effort for me to not come forward and talk about this sooner, because at 9 years old I probably would have been telling people more about this situation, but I didn't. And so after this fake lobotomy, they told me that I was stupid and that I couldn't use my imagination and like all of this stuff. So I was like highly traumatized from like 9 to 10 years old. And then gradually, because of that trauma, I just, I started compartmentalizing things. I stopped feeling bodily sensations along with the emotions related to it. I stopped feeling like all kinds of things because of the way that my parents would intentionally like trigger like an emotional response in me, and to enrage me and to like cause toxic stress. So I started making my mind go elsewhere when they would bring this kind of stuff up. So naturally, like over the course of like a decade, I started to forget, along with all the other shit that happened in my like home life, like which is insane. My dad almost killed my mom, and just like a whole bunch of other shit. So I just forgot. And then it took me getting sexually assaulted by a kid that like kind of resembles Harvey Weinstein for me to kind of remember and piece together all of this information, because I was so young when Harvey Weinstein raped me. And I should also mention this, like right now, my real name is, and my family does verifiably know James Gunn. So if you wanted to dig deep into that, there is evidence to prove that my family was well connected. My grandmother also knows people like Bernie Madoff. So that's the kind of situation that we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that like really wanted to run the world, and were totally okay abusing children to get to that point. I have had conversations for sure with my parents and stuff about actors selling their souls. And when Harvey Weinstein raped me, they told Megan Fox that now she was selling her soul to Hollywood or something by witnessing it or something like that. and they told me that my soul was already sold or some shit like that. I don't even know. And then they would come up with all these like rationalizations for like the fact that like our souls were gone, like we couldn't feel a specific emotion, so therefore like this person stole your heart, you know. With like the sex programming stuff, they talked about like the Kundalini opening, and like I was taught like different ways to orgasm, like at a super, super young age, and how it was like opening up your third eye, and it was like the Kundalini and shit like that. There's so much more to that. Yeah, they use spirituality heavy with this. They use the idea of you have, and that being like that you were psychologically bonded to them and you were psychic therefore after, like you were psychic because you had an orgasm with somebody, essentially, is like what they use for me in particular with Megan Fox. I don't know the details of hers, but yeah, so they basically did that. They did a whole like Satanism was definitely like a topic, but it was like not necessarily like, in my early childhood, they didn't talk about Satanism, but they talked about like homicide, like, you know, like I was like faking killing things. I was like, they were having me around like blood and gore. They made me like kill kittens and shit, you know. My dad did like fake kidnappings, which were like technically real kidnappings to terrorize us in the basement when I was like 2 and 3 years old. Satanism didn't come up for me until I committed a very serious act of sexual assault against another little girl when I was 8 years old. And then they were claiming that I was satanic and that I was like a ritual abuser and that I was like all of these different things, and that like I was like the reason for the season, and that all of the memories that I had about all the sexual abuse that my parents did on me were like not real, and that I had just like committed this like gross, disgusting act like just out of the blue at eight years old, you know. So like any talk of Satanism was like directed towards me, like I was satanic to these people, and that's how they like guided the perceptions of other people also. I was raised Catholic, and they basically utilized like Christianity and Catholicism against me to instill even more shame and guilt, basically, because they were basically taking away like certain values and certain ideas and stuff that are like Catholic and then are ingrained in Catholicism, and then like flipping the script and reversing it and making it seem like I was the one without those values when they originally did not have the values, and then I tried to express them and then was like mocked for trying to have like these values, right? And then subsequently like ended up like sexually like kind of torturing another girl my age when I was 8 years old. So, and then, you know, then they were just like, oh, you're the Satan kind of deal, you know. Yeah, like I had extreme rage towards my parents and stuff, you know, and it was like out of the blue, you know, like that's what they would say, right? That it was like completely out of the blue, and it wasn't, you know. It was like all justifiable as fuck. And so, yeah, they definitely made it a point to make me feel guilty for my actions when I lashed out, and unfortunately the way that it went was that I lashed out towards other children, you know, so it added to that guilt because I knew I had done these actions, right? And then with them pretending to be these like moral characters and these people that like actually cared about me and stuff like that, you know, they basically just like convinced me that everything that I was saying was lies because of the sexual actions that I took against like my siblings and against like other kids at school, and it's not, you know, it just, there's just no, like, it just isn't. Oh yeah, they gaslit the fuck out of me. They gaslit me, they tortured the living shit out of me. They convinced me that like the people that tortured me didn't really exist. They were all figments of my imagination. Like, they convinced me of all kinds of stuff. I'm trying to touch on some of your other stuff, about being able to process it and like you not being able to process it. Me as a child, I could not even understand why they were doing what they did to me. Like by the age of like 7 or 8, I was really starting to not understand why they were doing what they did to me and why I had all these memories of torture, because I would like hang out with other kids and like other kids didn't act the way that I did, and they weren't thinking about the things that I did. you know, and they weren't concerned that they were like a Russian spy. There was one time where they like made me have sex with my brother and then they asked me if I was genetically, they like grilled me, they like interrogated me like they were in the CIA and asked me if I was genetically modified and asked me if I came from a lab from Russia or China, like I didn't have a right to exist on this planet. And my dad was teaching me how to have sex at 4, and so they were like making child porn of me, essentially. Like my early childhood was me like in child pornography, having to do all kinds of stuff. And so like I couldn't process that shit at all, and like now I've been on so many different kinds of sedatives and medications that now I just like my emotions are completely shut off, so I'm able to actually articulate what's going on and I'm able to connect the dots, I think, a little bit better. But yeah, it was fucking insane, and the kinds of emotions that I had as a kid, I wouldn't wish on anyone because they were pure distress. I was purely in distress all throughout my childhood. Megan Fox and I didn't have any conversations like after this incident or before this incident. They literally just flew her out for this one incident to occur, and then Colson Baker, Machine Gun Kelly, and I don't remember if it was just a day that he did this or if it was like over the course of like a week or something, but like he and Pete Davidson both did it, and he was there first and then Pete like came later or something like that. And yeah, so I knew them, and then like knew Harvey Weinstein because he like had sex with me, and knew James Gunn and stuff like that. But like as far as like other celebrities are concerned, like I don't have any other names. It's just like these people that I know were involved. I do know that there was like some kind of like torture shit that I was doing to other kids when I was like 4. That were being primed for like certain positions. So there could be other kids that are now celebrities that were involved so there could be other kids that are celebrities currently or in other places in the world that I just don't know the names of, that would have been around my age, because I know that they were having me like whip other kids, and they were like actually having me like cattle prod other kids and stuff like that. So I know that they were actually doing these kinds of things. So I don't know who these kids are, but I do believe that Pete Davidson is one of them. I believe that Pete Davidson and I were like we've been part of this, I believe, since we were like 3 or 4 years old. So I do believe Pete Davidson was like originally there for some of the stuff that happened in my state, which is so I know that they definitely had Colson Baker conditioned, and he was definitely able to like draw from emotional experiences and conditioning to basically elicit an emotional response at will from like emotional memory. Like they had him like classically conditioned. So, and I went through a process where they deconditioned me essentially through fear. So I'm assuming that he probably went through the same thing, or he still is able to do that stuff. So like when Project Monarch talks about like switching and stuff, they actually were doing that with classical conditioning, and through psychological means to like get you to display an emotional reaction for whatever specific emotion they wanted you to convey by using memories of torture and using memories of abuse to convey that specific emotion. My parents would tell me that they were gonna sex traffic me to Putin and to Elon Musk and shit like that, and I am pretty sure that I knew how to speak some Russian at 3 and 4 years old, and they were like training me to be like a double agent, like assassin, even at 3 years old. So like somebody that could like fuck Russia up or fuck the US up, because I'm honestly not convinced at this point in time that my parents aren't like Russian, like some kind of, I don't know. Because there were a lot of like Russian things, and they accused me of being Russian so many times for so many different things that it just seems very strange to me that they wouldn't be somehow like connected. My dad used to say that he knew Versace and that she knew that I was a slave, and she knew about the child pornography and that she had watched it, but I don't have verification of that, and I've never seen her in person or met her in person at all, so I have no idea about her. So those were some of the names that were mentioned, but again, the Harvey Weinstein being the big one, James Gunn being the big one, and then Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox, and Pete Davidson being the other three. Those were the only three people that I met that, of the kids that they said were gonna for sure be famous or something like that. So, the other ones that I met, we were all like 4 years old when a lot of this was happening, so I wouldn't even be able to remember faces or anything, but I do think that some of these incidences were recorded. Where they've uploaded these videos, I don't know, but I know that, the child pornography that I was in, at least one video was uploaded, because I remember my parents showing me the comments and telling me that, like, you know, that nobody gave a fuck, because the comments were basically like saying that, like, fuck this little whore, like, go fuck yourself, like, she deserves it, stuff like that. So from like four on up, I was already shut down and convinced that, like, nobody cared. But then I started getting educated and started learning about cops and stuff, and started realizing that I had more power, and that was me realizing that I had more power and control over my own life was a big problem for my family. So they kept amping up the sexual abuse, and they kept making it more torturous psychologically. Like, the certain fairy tales were being taken away from me, certain life trajectory was being taken away from me, like I wasn't going to be in Hollywood, like stuff like that. So yeah, they really did a fucking really serious psychological damage, and their ultimate objective, I believe, was to give me schizophrenia through childhood trauma, to be able to use schizophrenia as a means to use me as a pawn, so they could pretend that they were in the CIA and use me as, like, the psychologically disabled pawn that has schizophrenia that doesn't know what's going on, essentially. And the fact that celebrities are actually involved and, like, were actually sexually abusive to me makes other people believe that this is, like, a schizophrenia situation, but it's not a schizophrenia situation. It's like an actual cult, and that's how they wanted to organize it, essentially, is they wanted me to be mentally ill and to appear mentally ill, and to basically be the mentally ill person that they know everything that's going on with me, that they could use to gain leverage into other places. So, like, business and, like, who runs the country and, like, the real Illuminati, even though they believe that they are the Illuminati, essentially. They wanted to, like, get in deep with, like, secret societies and stuff like that. They wanted more power and control, and probably more money also. There's a video of me and my brother being molested when I'm like 4 years old and he's 2, and we are being molested by some guy that's behind us, and he's telling us that we are being sex trafficked to Disney. And my dad told me it was James Gunn, but I don't believe James Gunn was actually there for this incident. It was like some other dude, but it might have been James Gunn. But James Gunn definitely came into my house and molested me, because my parents showed him a video of me, quote unquote, raping my brother at 4 years old, which is unlikely. It's an likely scenario, unless my dad was teaching me how to have sex, which is the case. My dad was teaching me how to have sex. So yeah. And then James Gunn came and molested me and said that, like, I was bad for doing that to my brother, and that he was gonna make movies about me and, like, all kinds of shit. James Gunn's also a neo-Nazi. He's like a white supremacist, because he used to say that I was the slave of people that had blue eyes, and that people with brown eyes were my slaves because I have green eyes. So this was like little, like, neo-Nazi indoctrination, like power domination kind of, like, indoctrination, stuff like that. And they literally made me torture Pete Davidson when he was like 4 years old because he had brown eyes. They basically told me parts of my brain were taken out that, like, could allow me to have the emotions of, like, disgust and fear and anger and hate. Essentially, they told me those parts of my brains were taken out, like, all throughout my childhood, so I couldn't properly express these emotions and heal with these emotions. They told me that, like, they just told me all kinds of stuff, and there was one time where they mocked a surgical intervention on my brain. It's called a psychosurgery here in the United States, in English. But yeah, they told me that I was, like, lobotomized and stuff like that. They told me I had a lobotomy, and an underground psychosurgery or lobotomy could have occurred, and it's honestly not out of the question with the kinds of people that I'm dealing with. These are like the kinds of people I'm dealing with that they would go through those kinds of lengths to cover up their tracks because they believe that whatever the fuck they're doing is somehow morally righteous and that they somehow are powerful because of it. There was one time that they had me suck a bunch of men's genitalia while these men were blindfolded, and my mom, like, she kept telling me to go faster and faster until I was like in an extreme state of distress. And they also told me that they were military men and that I would never know if they were Russian or if they were USA or whatever. Yeah, so that happened too when I was like 4. I might have been 3 when that happened. Yeah. I know that when I lived in the first house that I ever lived at, that I was born at, essentially, there were like a multitude of grown men that like molested me and sexually assaulted me. If some of those people were celebrities, I am not sure. You know, I was too young to be able to like even remember faces or like names or anything like that. And most of the time my parents weren't telling me the names when I was like that young. It was more just like torture kind of stuff, you know, where like people were blindfolded intentionally to like cause distress in me, to make me feel scared for my life. And to make me feel like I was surrounded by people that were like okay with abusing me, essentially. So yeah, most of it was like torture, and I wasn't aware of the names. It wasn't until like later on that they started like telling me the names, like Harvey Weinstein, James Gunn. They told me Harvey Weinstein wasn't a real person. They used a fake name, and then like it came out like that he was a real person, and then I started really going deep with it. And then I started contacting the cops about stuff. And contacting like the CIA about things and being like, listen, like Max looks like Harvey Weinstein. I feel responsible for global politics. This is not right, you know? And I told them that I was the victim of torture. They were always trying to make like Jewish people seem like extra grotesque to me too. They were like intentionally brainwashing me with like white supremacist ideologies about Jewish people and then reversing it in like the public sphere. And then also when we got older, telling me like that they love Jews and like all this stuff, but like really instilling like a deep-seated like hatred and animosity towards that community because it was like a power thing, you know, like a white supremacist indoctrination, like power thing. So yeah, my dad would say like the most insanely racist shit that you've ever heard, you know. And like here in the United States, like especially in the state that I'm in, very country kind of state. It's a very white people kind of state, you know. Racism runs deep here. And so he would basically try to convince us that it wasn't indoctrination and that this was just, you know, he was just a Midwestern guy, he was just from Texas, you know, that this wasn't just, it wasn't indoctrination is basically what he was trying to convince us. And it was like very, very much so indoctrination. It gets really political with this because they sexually conditioned me to express the sounds hee haw and like an elephant and like a donkey, which represent the donkey for Democrats and the elephant for Republicans. And they did this and they sexually conditioned me to do this when I orgasmed. And they continuously did it and then got other people involved to do it and stuff like that, and convinced these other people that they were the ones that were sex programming me to these things. But in reality, I had already been sexually conditioned at such a young age. I was already like 4 when that shit started, 3 probably. So, you know, like they convinced Colson Baker that he was the one sex programming me. And in reality, I had already been sexually conditioned for like years and years and years. My dad used to tell me that they were part of the globalist movement, is what he labeled it, that they were globalists or whatever. And that doesn't make much sense to me. I think they honestly were just people that wanted a lot of power and wanted to torture other people because it's, you know, to use that like ideological process and to state that that's like where you're coming from with this direction doesn't make much sense to me. Because I don't think globalism is about sexually torturing children. As far as the celebrities remembering and being traumatized, I think Machine Gun Kelly remembers, and I think Megan Fox both remember, because Machine Gun Kelly just did an interview with Barstool Sports, and he seemed really distressed in that interview, and I've been like going to the police with like this information like more recently. And so he seemed really distressed, like he's been being questioned. And Pete Davidson just went to dinner at the White House, so I'm hoping that he was questioned about it there as well. I think Megan Fox I think they all felt like what they did to me and what they witnessed with me was somehow justified, when they first hit superstardom, or they didn't even remember, and now they're kind of starting to remember exactly what happened. I do want to get it out more to the public. I have my own YouTube channel, but I don't really post on it. I'm kind of more just waiting for the criminal investigation to like end and start, and so I can actually have like, you know, like a criminal trial and everything like that. But I do want to get it out there, you know, like I do definitely want other people to know. I have posted about it like somewhat on social media, but a lot of it just started coming up like more recently. And I am actually 28 years old, so I'm the same age as Pete Davidson. So Pete Davidson was 8 years old when this all happened, and Machine Gun Kelly was 11, and Megan Fox was 13 because I was raped by Harvey Weinstein when I was 6, so she was 13 years old when she saw that occur. I'm sure James Gunn remembers, because he's made all of his movies essentially hinting at like the child pornography that I was in. He's like had like Ellen Page rape somebody in a movie, and it was like directly because of some child pornography that I was in. And he's trying to paint it out like he's like somehow inspired by my story or something like that, but that's not at all true in my opinion. There's also potentially an attempted or completed homicide that my parents had. Like my parents may have made me kill a baby and then told me it was James Gunn's when I was like 3. So they may have actually had like a child that was like illegally here in the United States or undocumented in their possession, and they may have actually had me kill this infant. My parents also had me talking to Russian soldiers when I was like 4 years old, and these Russian soldiers literally asked me when I was 4 if they should start a war in Ukraine, okay? And I told them yes, because my mom acted like she was Ukrainian like the same day and was really scary and creepy, and so I told them yes, alright? So they literally were having me communicate with Russian soldiers at 4, and then they told me that I was going to start a war in Ukraine because of that incident, because they set me up. And then my dad told me that I was genetically modified, okay, and that I was a super smart person and a super soldier and stuff like that. And then Megan Fox was also genetically modified and would never forgive me for starting the war in Ukraine. Which makes no sense, because even a genetically modified child probably cannot fucking start a global war like that. And so my parents were like blaming me for that even before it started, because Russia's been talking about this for like years and years and years. So they've been blaming me for this for years and telling me that like I was Russian and that I was Svetlana and that I wanted to commit homicides in the name of Russia and stuff like that. And that's just not even true. Like, I'm Swiss. It makes me think that this cult and this like pedophilia thing like spans to Russia, and like somebody that they had me talk to was some kind of person that was like involved in pedophilia that just happened to be from Russia, and they just wanted to make me feel guilty for like starting a war, and they wanted me to feel guilty for like US politics and stuff, because they also told me that the baby I killed was Russian. So they were like trying to make me this like CIA super spy, but also make me feel guilty about being Russian, which is super fucking weird. My YouTube channel doesn't really have anything on it. It used to have one video where I talked about what happened to me in college because a hit had been put on me since I was 8. I've literally had a hit put out on me since I was 8. So like currently, like I know that like somebody wants to kill me. There's like more than one person that wants to kill me. So I'm just I'm honestly so suicidal that like I don't know if I give a shit if somebody shoots me, you know, when I speak the truth. And like, so I'm not afraid to be anonymous at all. Like I will like say my name, like that doesn't scare me at all.